In an era of filmmaking that's essentially been defined by, well, that just happened style snark and MCU-esque jokes that undercut tension, it's far from the worst thing for a movie to be serious, or rather sincere. Sincerity is a key ingredient behind some of our favorite movies ever, but there are other times where a serious bent can actually undermine what's being shown on screen, either because it ignores the obvious humor of a given scenario, or due to the material itself lacking the quality to justify such a committed approach. I'm Ewan, this is What Culture, and here are 10 movies that take themselves way too seriously. Number 10. The Lion King, 2019. We have somehow gotten 9 straight-up live-action remakes of animated Disney classics since 2016's The Jungle Book. If someone had to be the keys to a time machine right now, I would be traveling back to rectify whatever canon event brought this trend into existence, and it's now produced a scenario where the director of Moonlight is set to direct a Lion King sequel that Deadline loftily compared in approach to The Godfather Part 2. Out of all the live-action remakes we've gotten so far, 2019's The Lion King has to be the most ridiculous, and it's mainly down to the CGI creatures themselves. A core tenet that makes anthropomorphic characters work in animation is that they're so expressive. You watch the original Lion King, and you can register the look of panic in Mufasa's eyes at Scar's betrayal, the jokey, carefree attitude of Timon and Pumbaa, or even the come-to-bed eyes Nala gives Simba when they reunite. Meow indeed. Now, compare that to Jon Favreau's 2019 remake. None of it hits anywhere near the level of emotion or artistry as the original, because we're literally just looking at some digital animals looking at each other. Far from this just being an execution problem, this gets at the core of what makes Disney's live-action redos of their animated catalog so ridiculous. The implication that live action is by default a more mature approach to the material, when in reality, watching CGI lions stare back and forth at each other is just plain silly. Number 9. Joker. The thing with Joker is that, yeah, he's dark, he's scary, but he's also a colourful, jokey supervillain who tortures a man in a bat costume with various antics. Even when he's at his cruelest, there should always be a glint of humour. Think The Dark Knight's pencil trick scene, or Batman 89's joy buzzer moment. This is what makes director Todd Phillips' 2019 Joker movie such a bizarre film. Although redeemed somewhat by a tremendously physical Joaquin Phoenix performance, Joker is a borderline plagiaristic, humorless, and ultimately drab effort that is far more concerned with badly remaking 2 Scorsese classics than it is in telling a story that is authentic to Joker as a character. I'm not arguing for tonal conformity across all Joker stories. There's potential to do a great dark Joker tale that leans away from that humorous side, but at the very least, it should be original, and not trade on the legacies of 70s masterpieces like Taxi Driver or The King of Comedy. While we're here though, here's a fun question. How do you want Joker to be used in Matt Reeves' Batman trilogy? Are you a fan of the more grounded take, or is it time we got our old party man back? Number 8. The Son. Florian Zeller's life-affirming drama about an old man suffering from dementia was one of 2021's best films. His follow-up to The Father, though, was one of the worst of 2022. The Son takes a look at a troubled father-son relationship, with a star-studded cast that includes Hugh Jackman, Laura Dern, Vanessa Kirby, and Anthony Hopkins. It sure sounds like a winning recipe, but The Son is far from the gem it should have been. Zeller did some astounding work with The Father, but little of that film's delicacy and depth can be found in The Son, which has some great performances, but can't quite find the words needed to explore the complex and compelling themes at its center. Number 7. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 2022. There's an ugliness to David Blue Garcia's Texas Chainsaw Massacre that is really admirable. The requel, which ignores all other Texas Chainsaw movies apart from the 1974 original, is humid, dirty, and thoroughly repulsive. A Gen Z update on Tobe Hooper's peerless classic that dives into themes of gentrification, social media-fueled reactionism, and the national nightmare of a generation traumatized by gun violence. These are all worthy beats to touch on, but they're undercut in key areas by an oscillating tone and the now derivative setup of a traumatized legacy character emerging to confront their old slasher adversary. While Texas Chainsaw Massacre isn't unyieldingly serious, it does miss some obvious humor in the fact that the version of Leatherface seen in the film should really be 75 to 80 years old. There's a lot of gallows comedy to extract from that premise, but instead, we see the lumbering, aging Sawyer sibling turn into just another Jason, snapping bones in half with his bare hands and chopping through the influences encroaching on his town with ease. The most bizarre thing about this, though, is that while there is humor in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it seems bizarrely mixed up. Leatherface's acrobatics are played completely seriously, and yet the film, which has already rooted itself within the context of school shootings with Elsie Fisher's Lila, goes on to have a scene where Leatherface massacres a bus full of young people with numerous gags included for comedic effect. If you're making a statement on gun violence, it would make sense the scene that has the most obvious parallels between them to be played earnestly. Instead, we're made to point and laugh at these guys as they're torn to shreds. It's messy and contradictory, and while the nihilistic streak occasionally pays off, like with the ending, it never quite manages to get the balance right. Number 6. Collateral Beauty. Will Smith has always liked to make dramas that go deep for the heartstrings, with varying results. Some, like The Pursuit of Happiness, have soared. Others, like After Earth and 7 Pounds, have flopped hard. The same goes for his more recent dud Collateral Beauty, a well-meaning but sentimentally insincere melodrama about a businessman who sinks into depression following the death of his daughter, and subsequently has his career sabotaged by his co-workers. Now, to his credit, Smith is pretty damn good as a grieving father, but the rest of the film, from its unlikable supporting characters, wasted cast, and bizarrely fantastical plot twists, is far too over the top to take seriously. Number 5. Ghostbusters Afterlife. As far as legacy sequels go, Ghostbusters Afterlife isn't all bad. It coasts on breezily thanks to the charms of Paul Rudd and the rest of its cast, led by McKenna Grace and Finn Wolfhard. However, it does indulge in pretty much every legacy sequel cliche we've gotten since The Force Awakens Lightspeed jumped onto the scene in 2015, whether that be the breathless pace in which it indulges in whimsical callbacks to the original films, or the frankly abominable attempts at resurrecting beloved actors who have passed away. Afterlife is a textbook example of self-seriousness undermining a movie. While the first 2 Ghostbusters movies were sincere, more so than I think some portions of the internet are willing to give credit for, they were still ultimately funny, which Jason Reitman's film largely isn't. Afterlife is just bizarrely morose. It includes the bleak revelation that Hal Ramis' Egon was abandoned by the rest of the Ghostbusters and died on his own, away from his family, defending the Earth against a ghostly threat. That's just way too much melodrama for Ghostbusters, and there's no reason why Afterlife couldn't have honored Ramis without undercutting the first 2 films, not to mention the whole CG ghost debacle. Part of Ghostbusters' charm is that iconic Aykroyd-Ramis sincerity, but there's a difference between that and pulling away at everyone's nostalgia strings for the entire runtime. Number 4. The Mummy 2017. Ah, the Dark Universe, we hardly knew you. Universal's attempt at crafting a new horror cinematic universe died very unceremoniously with The Mummy, a loose remake of the same titled 1999 classic, itself a remake, albeit a good one, that was meant to be a moody horror flick before Tom Cruise took control of the project, hoping to make it more suited to his action hero persona. The results are pretty shocking, with Cruise giving one of the least inspired performances of his career, and director Alex Kurtzman unable to balance the film's brief trips into horror, uninspired action, and dire attempts to set up a franchise. Number 3. Max Payne. An adaptation of an otherwise brilliant gaming franchise, Max Payne is yet another example of video games that shouldn't be given the big screen treatment. Starring Mark Wahlberg as a detective on the hunt for the killer who murdered his wife and child, Max Payne was directed in a desperate attempt to emulate the comic book stylings of the far superior Sin City, its dark, gloomy aesthetic making its central mystery difficult to accept for entertainment. Max Payne is, all told, grueling, presented with little flair but trying painfully hard to craft a powerful tale of revenge. This is one game that should have been left alone. Number 2. Dredd. Right off the bat, there is something I need to clarify with this entry. I like Dredd. Dredd is good. It's one of the most stylish, atmospheric action films of the 2010s, and a fine enough course correction from the ridiculousness that was Sylvester Stallone's I Am the Law movie in 1995. However, Dredd also sorta misses the entire vibe of the comics completely. Again, that doesn't make it a bad movie, but it does make it a bad adaptation. Let me explain. The Judge Dredd comics published by 2000 AD are satirical, with Dredd the face of a futuristic, fascist police state that was conceptualized at the back end of the 1970s. The commentary in these books was pointed but comical. There is literally an entire arc where different fast food tyrants, the literal Burger Kings if you will, have taken control of different parts of America and are worshipped like gods. I mean, I understand, who wouldn't want to worship the Sneak King himself, but you get the point. Dredd is at its best when it's brutal, but funny. And 2012's Dredd movie, despite being well-directed, shot, and performed, is anything but. And number 1, The Sea of Trees. All great comebacks have to end somewhere, and the reconnaissance ended here with Gus Van Sant's insanely distasteful drama, The Sea of Trees. Matthew McConaughey stars here as a deeply depressed man who travels to Japan's Akigahara forest to kill himself. Only before he can do the deed, he meets a Japanese man out to end his own life, and the pair soon find themselves in a bid to survive the forest and find a reason to keep living. Manipulatively sentimental and groan-inducingly tactless, shifting from compelling character study to survival thriller without any warning, The Sea of Trees is emotionally trite and impressively ham-fisted. And those were 10 movies that take themselves way too seriously. Are there any other films you think suffered due to their own self-seriousness? Shout them out down in the comments below. Please remember to drop the video a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to the channel if you're new and want more. Either way, I've been Ewan, this has been Wild Culture, and I'll hopefully see you next time. Bye!